Good evening.
And we'll be right with you. We're getting ready to start in a moment. You hit the got it with that house. On top of school. We're gonna need it. All right, are we working? Can everyone on Zoom hear me just fine?
Yes.
Yes,
Good. David and Jaime, thank you very much.
Good ears.
Good. Welcome to our resident meeting. Glad to have you all here this evening. Thank you for the folks that came out on this rainy, nasty, wet, provoking day. So thank you so much for coming out. And we've got some folks that are going to be on Zoom as well. This meeting is being recorded, and we will be posting this meeting to Facebook. So folks that missed it can come back, or if you want to come back and view it, you're welcome to come back. The full draft report tonight, we're going to be talking about our draft strategic plan. It is up on our website. If you look at our website and go to the top of the website, you're going to see it right there. You're going to click on it, read our entire plan. We don't know if we have any extra copies here tonight, but if you come to the office and with a request, we'll give you a copy as well. We are hoping that a week from tomorrow night, at our April 14th HHA Board of Commissioners meeting, we'll be approving the plan. So it will be up for a vote. So participate as much as you'd like. We'd love to hear your voices tonight. We'd love to hear your voices during the week and at our board meeting next week. But we've been working hard on this plan for well over a year. So we welcome all of you. We're glad you're here. For those of you that have been with us for these 16 months of work on this plan. I am going to be presenting some frequently asked questions tonight to you and talking to you about a number of the comments we've had. But first, we're going to ask our planning team to do a review of the plan that we've had so far. They're going to be doing a review on the report, on the planning concepts. They're going to be taking a look at the questions that we've had. And we're going to open it up to questions from you and from the folks on Zoom as well. So I think at this point, I'm going to be pretty much ready to turn it over to the planning team to give their presentation. Angel, are we ready to share the screen? And who on the screen is going to be sharing their screen? Who from the planning team?
Hi, everybody. It's Brian Tomeno. I'm going to be sharing my screen, but if Angel or Lourdes could stop sharing their screen for a second so I can share mine, because I can't overrule it current. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Brian, we thought you had all power. You could overrule anything.
I know. I wish. Tell that to my 3-year-old daughter. Good evening, everyone. It's really good to see your faces, even though you're, a little fuzzy. But we've been presenting to, just in Zoom for a few months. So it's good to see familiar faces that we met during our interactive design workshops and resident meetings in person last year. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Can you raise your hand if you can hear me? Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So. And everyone can see the screen. I'm going to go ahead. This is just the cover sheet, but so first off, the reason we're here tonight is again to we last resident meeting we reviewed in more detail the plan, the strategic plan, the draft strategic plan. So we're just going to go through it again, and we really want to focus tonight on questions you might have or comments. But I'm going to go through it very quickly. The full report, however, is in on the Housing Authority's website. On the front page, you can click on it and it'll take you to an online version where you can read all 100 and so pages of it. And that's really the best way to understand all of the details and all of the explanations of everything. We've tried to break it out. So the next slide here just shows, this is very quickly, but this is the table of contents taken directly from the book. And it's broken up into, kind of an overall summary statements and an introduction, We go through the existing conditions, which we've reviewed with you guys very, almost a year ago, starting in the summer, really. The previous planning initiatives, acknowledging that there are a lot of different plans that happened throughout the years. We studied those. We studied the current city plans as well to make sure we're not going against something that'll be in conflict. And then we talk about the planning process a lot, and I'll mention that a little bit more tonight too. The market analysis, the design concept itself, which we'll focus on tonight. We're not going to focus too much on phasing tonight, but the phasing plan, a phasing plan is in there on page 81. And then after that, there's also a public housing repositioning assessment, which essentially means how the numbers pan out. And my colleague, Jaime Bordonavi, has kind of filled that session out. And again, to make this more real and to make this a framework for the residents, for the whole housing authority and the housing authority board, to really use this as a chart to go forward into the next steps. So this isn't the final plan. This isn't the final concept, really. It's a framework to kind of get you to the next step and to really see the future ahead, where you as residents will have constant and ongoing input to allow at those next stages. I want to keep stressing that too, that we've been very thankful for your input so far, and we've been thankful for the residents' input in particular, but also the board, the executive team, Mark and his team, as well as a lot of stakeholders throughout the city that gave input. Speaking of that stakeholder input, I'm just going to run through really quickly, but to kind of summarize the public engagement and outreach. If you remember, this strategic plan process started in the spring of last year in 2021, where I think it kicked off with a resident advisory board meeting and a site visit by our team. Then we came back up with a larger group and met with you guys on the field and had some stakeholder meetings there with you, as well as an ongoing discussion and interviews with several, many stakeholders throughout Hoboken. And then, in October or the end of September, really, we had a design workshop. And then throughout this whole thing, we've been meeting with your board. We've been meeting with Mark and Frank and Lourdes and Daniel and the team on a weekly basis. And we've been meeting with the residents as well. And also towards the end, you guys participated in a resident survey that we've incorporated some of those results and have in our appendix of this document. This just goes through, I'm not going to read all of these, but on the left are all of the different stakeholder meetings that we had. They were, hour-long meetings or more that we would interview important people to make sure that everybody in Hoboken had a chance to contribute and a chance to help this neighborhood get revitalized. And then, of course, the ongoing resident meetings on the right, I just added. So you can see, from our big public meeting on August 11th under the tent, as well as the interactive design workshop on the 29th, we've been having regular meetings with you guys from throughout the fall and winter, and including tonight. And we will, I think, going forward, like I said, that regular resident input and meetings and participation will be critical, and we'll hope to see you guys in this process ongoing. So to summarize our goal when we started, and just to get everyone on the same page again, is that the housing authority's properties are distributed throughout Hoboken, but primarily located on the main campus. And it comprises of 6 different, we call them AMPs, which are kind of like little small neighborhoods or HUD designations. But as you can see, it amounts to 1,354 units, 1,354 units. That includes 200 of the units that are renovation on going on Fox Hill, as you're probably aware. So the remaining units are still the old housing stock that was the original housing stock for the authority. It includes 2 senior tower buildings, Adams and Monroe Gardens, that are a little bit younger in age and a little bit more positioned to be renovated than to be torn down and rebuilt. but we did kind of come to a conclusion through this process with everybody, that everybody's input, that the rest of the existing housing is old enough and needs so much work that it would be better to demolish in a phased process and then rebuild brand new modern buildings that are safer and that are up to all of the modern codes and have air conditioning and all of those kind of modern things you'd expect that you guys need. So the big statement here that that we've said over and over again, but it really is the most important thing, and it's the thing that we hold the most true, is the 1-for-1 replacement remains the overall guiding principle, as does the assurance that there will be no displacement of existing residents. So there's 1,354 units today. At the end of this process, you know, in years from now, when we replace everything and renovate everything, there'll be at least 1,354 units. We won't lose any. No one will have to move out of the housing authority properties. So I'm just going to quickly go through this. You've seen this diagram before. It's also, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner of this this presentation, and it might be kind of hard for you to see, but on page 83 of the actual strategic plan, all of these graphics that I'm talking about tonight are in the actual strategic report, so a strategic plan. So anything I see here, you can refer back to either online. So this just talked about the idea of, in order to avoid displacement, and again, that's the overriding principle of the Housing Authority and the board, no displacement. In order to do that, we needed to find a parcel of land that we could build first. Could build a big building on it first, and then take those, start moving residents into that building to free up other land to build other big buildings or larger buildings that then can free up other land. That kind of starts this great domino effect that people can start moving into new units. So again, nothing new here, but we also have tried to ground this plan in reality as much as possible. So that, what does that mean? It means not developing pie in the sky concepts that are unaffordable to build, not developing on land that we don't have control of, that the Housing Authority doesn't have control of today. So it's risk management in a lot of ways, where you have control of this land today. You can start this process as soon as you can, rather than if we had proposed building on like, for instance, the substation or another piece of land in Hoboken that we don't own or control, that would throw the reality of this plan into question immediately. So we started with the Harrison parking lot as the best case scenario. It's a large enough, flat enough parcel of land that allows you to build a new building on there, a modern building on there, to get the ball rolling. So I just jumped. So the next page here, you can see on the left is the blue buildings on the left are the kind of the current campus layout. The buildings on the right, the image on the right is our overall proposed plan. Okay, and so this is again, it's a plan, but not the final plan. This is a concept that could take you and help everybody understand what could possibly be here. But the idea is to bring back a street grid, which helps promote better circulation, better security and safety of both the residents as well as anybody walking through here on safer sidewalks, and not providing any kind of dead ends. But the next, excuse me, let me just take a breather. So the other big concept here is to provide a variety of open spaces and parks in this plan that celebrates Mama Johnson as your community hub, but also distributes some other open spaces around. And as you can see, the buildings here are kind of colored green. We're noting that these will likely have green roofs on them. And green roofs is one strategy that we've promoted and suggest to really tackle the stormwater and flooding issue that we've heard so much about and witnessed throughout this process, you guys having to deal with. not only with the buildings, strategies within the buildings and in the properties, but also the idea of proposing a new amenity and a new resiliency park that we could have on the western border that could help manage, slow down, treat, or slow down and store some of that stormwater to prevent massive flood events in this part of town. So those are kind of the big principles of this plan. But the idea is to build incrementally, phase by phase, and this would be the final phase after a long time. And step one really would be to building on that. Let me just zoom in here, but it would be building on F1 would be the first phase. Another, just going through some principles of how this works is the ground floor of these units would not have residents on them to protect them from any kind of flooding that could happen in Hoboken. That's a Hoboken standard. As you probably know, any new building does not have residences on the first floor. So what does that allow for? That allows for some other uses on the ground floor. And one being that we heard from the residents, very much so. We also heard from several stakeholders that there needed to be more community space, community service space for not only youth after school youth centers, community centers in general, larger community centers in each building, but some other services, potential for commercial space, maybe some small shops that would be oriented towards the community itself, as well as spaces for all of the great nonprofits and religious organizations that work with the community. Having space for food banks, having space for services on certain, for worship, different things that could happen on that ground floor. We try to locate those in orange here as possibilities on each building and around park spaces so they could interact with those. Mama Johnson Field is the kind of the hub of the community now, and we wanted to preserve that, not really change it much, but maybe enhance it a little bit. Again, I spoke to you about that resiliency park, and just bring back the kind of the block size of Hoboken that you see around to provide very realistic, very appropriately scaled buildings and walkable neighborhood that would kind of weave back into Hoboken and create a place for success for the residents. I'm not going to go through all these principles because I went through this in several other meetings, and this is also on page 82 of the plan. But the expanded principles were some direction that we got from the Housing Authority Board that really nailed down some kind of direction. One of them is to focus on phase one, and this is a 3D plan of the main campus. But the idea is to focus on the build first site F1, and then as we get further out into the future, to focus less on the amount and types of buildings there, but to provide replacement housing is in the first several phases is pure replacement for all of the residents. And so to build around Mama Johnson Field, potentially get taller buildings as we go, especially along the back edge, along the Palisades, to promote views that way, and also closer to the light rail station. But also to utilize Christopher Columbus Gardens as a place to also renovate or demolish and renovate once those residents would move out. That would allow some more folks to move to Christopher Columbus. That place, they would get much more units there, but that would help the phasing process as well. And then for both Adams and Monroe, it's allowing those residents to or those buildings to be substantially renovated. So it's another term in the state is called gut renovation, but it would be taking it down to its structure, rebuilding those units to be more accommodating for accessibility, universal design, which means people of all ages, especially seniors, can use the apartments and not feel constricted, and people with all sorts of disabilities as well. So to be universally designed. Another big move is to potentially build another senior building or a senior-oriented preferred building on Mama Johnson. That would allow for one of Monroe or Adams to move into that building and then allow that, empty out that building without anyone losing their a unit within the housing authority and renovate those. So there's all these kind of intermediate steps to allow for residents to move into new units while we can either renovate or demolish the other ones. And getting to the kind of the fun part, these are some of our, we call these are illustrations or renderings. These are, we hired an artist that we work with a lot that helps us kind of visualize what this neighborhood could be in 10 years or even more, when all of these buildings are built and the community is kind of settled, and it turns into something it's a real hub for the larger Hoboken as well. So you can see here, this is a view that's looking kind of on the Palisades at the north end of the main campus looking south. And so maybe in the upper right-hand corner would be the light rail station. And then on the right-hand side of the image here is a resiliency park that would be a nice scale to walk through in the evenings, maybe having tot lots, maybe having different spaces for different age kids, having a multi-use path that you could ride a bike or walk down, but also having a street that comes through. Marshall Drive would come up, which really helps take the current notion of the main campus kind of backing up to the Palisades, backing up to the light rail tracks, and creating kind of some unsafe conditions, an unsafe edge there, and creating another way to walk to the light rail station, another way to kind of connect everybody together, and also creating kind of fronts to all of these buildings that would all of a sudden have kind of a parkside view to enjoy the Palisades, especially at fall, and really think about the Palisades and this new resiliency park as a value to the housing authority properties, that you could look out and see a park space instead of, what it is now, which is kind of residual land. And again, let me stress that the resiliency park is named resiliency park to be resilient for stormwater and flood events, that could help. And that is in line with larger plans for Hoboken and even federal FEMA plans to help with Hoboken's storm surges. They've already located this area as a potential area to do this. And so we're just creating a spot that the housing authority could work with New Jersey Transit to do so. The next rendering is a kind of coming down to, let me go back to real quick. We wanted to just talk about the Mama Johnson Field again on the image here. Zooming in, you can see the tents there. We kind of joked that this is like the community meeting we had last year. We're back again to celebrate this thing being finished. But in reality, you can see this being kind of framed by buildings all around. So the next image will be kind of zooming down into kind of where my mouse is, right in the middle of Mama Johnson Field, and looking at the building on the left was just a possible scale and design for the first phase building. It would have again, it would be a corridor apartment building with elevators and modern amenities inside of that, modern units, and units that will be built to the utmost design codes and building codes, which include fire safety and the like. And then, beyond that are future phases, but you can see all of a sudden these buildings coming together to create an edge, a wall edge that creates a more defined and active and safe environment that Mama Johnson can be. And you can imagine all of these ground floors around here becoming those community spaces. We envision the space on the right here to be maybe a large neighborhood scale community center that could spill out into Mama Johnson and have events that would happen inside and out. The tot lots that are there now are great. We want to preserve that kind of stuff, but also create space for all ages. And then really celebrate the kind of connection of walking through Mama Johnson, outside of the ball field, but creating that, keeping the ball field, keeping things similar to how they are, but how can we make them even better? That by the way, the design of Mama Johnson Field will certainly need your input, need the residents' input into the future. So keep thinking about that, keep getting excited about that. The next image is of Christopher Columbus. So you can see Christopher Columbus, as you recognize it now, it's kind of a cruciform, two buildings that are kind of smaller and very different from its surroundings. But in the middle of that, of the current Christopher Columbus, is a beautiful park space, right, with mature trees and a small tot lot and places for sitting. We really enjoyed that space and didn't want to get rid of it in this concept, but rather celebrate it by creating two buildings that will be larger than the ones currently and allow for more residents to maybe move off of the main campus, but preserving that as a ground floor, as a park space, also creating private spaces within the courtyards of all the buildings for the residents. And that's something I can go back to maybe this image here. You can see each of these buildings in the site plan real quick. I'm just going to jump to the site plan. Each of these buildings have courtyard spaces that would be for residents only. It would be a mixture of balconies and then spaces to have grills and things like that in the inside. Some of them we took some great feedback from the resident advisory board of opening some of them up and having the possibility that there'd be a secure entrance outside of the corridors to come in and out and to kind of feel connected to the neighborhood, but providing some open ones, some closed ones for everybody's different preferences. It's getting back to the rendering here, just showing how these buildings are within the scale of the neighborhood, within the kind of the increment of the neighborhood, but still providing that kind of variety of open spaces and green spaces that exist there today. I'm just going to go through these very quickly again, because these are in the plan, the strategic plan on different pages. This one's on page 66, for example, but this just talks about creating very efficient and appropriately scaled blocks that allow for affordable or economical buildings to be built. So we're not, again, designing something that is unrealistic to be built in the near future, but also aligns with how the rest of Hoboken's block structure is created, which will help kind of blend it back in, so it's not distinguished as much as there's the housing authority land in the rest of Hoboken. We heard a lot of input that we want to kind of get back to being part of Hoboken in its form. Again, this is just open spaces. I've talked about this a lot, but this just diagrams the different types. There's the green elevated residential courtyards above the flood elevation. And then there's also the dark green, which are kind of the ground floor ones, including Mama Johnson, including maybe some new park spaces and plaza spaces to help everybody have some space to kind of enjoy the outdoors and be healthy. Not to be discounted, but parking is very important in any kind of plan at this scale, and any building plan really, and acknowledging that parking's kind of tight already. The idea from this concept is to create on that ground floor, there'll always be space to have controlled resident parking within the building on that first floor, but also have areas for those community spaces as well. So these are just areas that could be ground floor parking that would be controlled. And then you can see in red, these red dashes here are on-street parking, kind of parallel parking that would increase the amount of spaces again on the property and contribute to both visitor parking for family and friends, but also potential resident parking to kind of give you an opportunity without also providing too much parking, which could limit the amount of space we could build new buildings on. And it also makes buildings very, very expensive when you add lots of parking. When you live so close to a light rail and it's such a walkable community, the next couple steps of this process will be determining how much parking you guys need, want, and then designing towards that. But these are some opportunities where that could happen. And these next two are real quick, but just, the light blue roads here on the plan are the existing kind of grid streets, and the blue are the roads that we would propose building back to kind of create a much cleaner and safer circulation pattern that aligns with the kind of one-way street system that you have in getting you to the light rail station. Layered on top of that, I'm going to zoom into this drawing here, which is kind of blurry on the screen, but we talk about the idea of, it's called complete streets, right? So a street that is built for, obviously for cars and delivery trucks and fire engines and ambulances, but also for bicycles, for wheelchairs, for people walking, and people wanting to enjoy their, maybe a front yard or a stoop, or maybe some ground floor outdoor seating, for instance, in parks or in commercial spaces. So a good street can accommodate all of that in a safe manner, in a manner that promotes walking, it promotes biking, it promotes healthier ways to, and also promotes options for getting around. And so the current, your current plan kind of promotes vehicles more than it does anything else. So this kind of creates all of these streets that are together. And so this next diagram very quickly just talks about the purple being, every street would have sidewalks on both sides. There would be opportunities for multi-use paths throughout the parks. And then some bike lanes that exist on the streets today would just kind of connect in to get you to the parks, to get you out to services, those types of things. So this is just back to the plan again, just to kind of show you, again, this would start with a building F1, but it would be a phased process. And I implore you to look at the report in detail, because we break out each phasing, a possibility of each phasing plan to go forward. So F1 would be built, and then things start to move where residents would move in from one part of the plan to clear out efficient areas to build modern buildings, and then move more residents in, so then we could clear out those buildings. So there would be it's a process where you build first, residents move in, and then empty out their old building, take those down, and then build first, residents move in, kind of a domino effect until everybody gets in. And so this plan provides for at least 1354 units. I'm sorry, 1154 really, if you don't count Fox Hill Gardens. And then it also provides some flexibility in the long-term future for you to decide if you want to provide more additional housing, additional uses to kind of offset costs, or maybe to help start to distribute the housing authority properties throughout the city. But that is a very long-term goal, but this plan provides flexibility to do a lot of things more specifically in the near term, and then a little less specifically in the far term, acknowledging that it's impossible to plan for buildings 10 years out. It just doesn't, we want to plan for a successful neighborhood 10 years out, but give you the flexibility to adapt to what the housing authority and its residents need at those times. And then just the next steps is a very important part. This is at the tail end of the document, but it's a very important part, obviously. And it emphasizes that this strategic plan is a strategy, and it's a concept, it's a framework, but it's not the last plan. The next step will be getting into the city process of getting a redevelopment plan started, which would help change the zoning and allow for more dense housing, allow for a mixture of uses or whatever we need to kind of help make this neighborhood successful. The city has been reviewing this, and we've been working with the city, and they've reviewed the draft plan as well. So nothing will be a shock to the city. And the idea was to kind of get all of these stakeholders on board, working with all of you to then have a much smoother process going forward. So this doesn't become the last plan, but rather the kickoff of a much bigger successful process. And that is the end of my spiel. So I wanted to thank you for your time on that, and open it up to any questions or feedback. And then I think at some point after this, Mr. Recco will have, he also has kind of a list of some questions we've received throughout this whole year, really. And then also some questions we've received recently that he can answer, that we received, I think we received in the last several community meetings, either on Facebook comments or emails. But again, thank you for your time. And I really look forward to working with everybody on this past year. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'd like to ask Brian if you could go back to the kind of bird's eye view that shows the overall block plan for the units.
Like this one?
Yes, I think that'll work. If you could zoom in just a tiny little bit. Excellent. Okay, that's good enough for now. I'd like to make, just as we do the presentation, a few comments again. This plan assures us that we can replace every one of our units, that no one has to lose a unit. No one, right? Across the board. This isn't a plan where some people move out off of public housing, off of the Hoboken Housing Authority property. This plan has assured us that with property that we own right now, our property, that we can rebuild every single unit that the Housing Authority has, that no resident has to leave our property during this whole process. Hurry, turn page. No one has to leave, right? And we've not only worked it out schematically that it works, but the finances are there as well. We have studied it very, very carefully and closely. This is doable. We can do this under existing HUD programs. So I'm absolutely confident of a couple things here. One, many things, but a couple of big ones. No resident has to be displaced. Every resident will have a unit when this is done. Every single resident that's living with us. Number two, that we're committed to replacing every one of those units. Our board is committed. And I think, speaking of our board, did Dave leave us? Was he back? And Aaron Lewis here from our board as well. And so that's crucial. And that was a number one priority from the beginning, the very beginning of this project. All of this works on property that we own or control. If during the process of this whole great roadmap and plan we have, imagine if we can find another parcel someplace else in Hoboken to also expand, to deconcentrate our units. If we can find a unit on the north end of town, the east end of town, that we can actually go in and build there, we will. What we wanted to present in this plan was to be sure that with our existing property, Brian mentioned this, it's not pie in the sky, it's with our existing property, we can do this. If we can find another property, and I think it's real possible that we can over time, maybe we can build one of these buildings over here, over on the other side of town. It's very possible. This is a roadmap, it's a plan, it's a strategy. It's not word for word and exact. It's our roadmap to show that we can actually do this. If you look at these buildings, the intent, one of the major intents, was to make the Hoboken Housing Authority look like the rest of Hoboken, right? Some of you might, I use the term anyway, that there's sometimes imaginary railroad tracks running down Jackson Street, that our main campus is on the other side of the tracks, right? No more, no more. Somebody comes to town after this is done, they come to Hoboken, they would not know that this is public and assisted housing. You couldn't tell the difference. It will have all the amenities that the rest of Hoboken has. It will look similar to the rest of Hoboken. You would never know it. And that's one of our main goals here, is to integrate and make all of our buildings part of Hoboken. You don't mind if I point with my candy. It will be the same as the rest of Hoboken, so you wouldn't know. And that's been a crucial part that we've had from the beginning. Our ground floors, maybe Brian, that view of Mama Johnson Field, go into Mama Johnson Field, that next one you had, yeah. You see this, you can imagine this with Mama Johnson will remain. Period, turn page, Mama Johnson's gonna be there, right? This is, for example, the first building, and you've got a ground floor that not only has room for community rooms, community space, maybe that coffee shop like the rest of, or that bodega like the rest of Hoboken, or maybe a doctor's office, et cetera, but also these ground floors, as Brian said, by code cannot be living units. They have to be some type of community space or parking. So these ground floors in all these buildings will be parking, and there'll be community space, there'll be commercial space, there'll be room for all of that. So as you walk down, imagine you're at Mama Johnson Field. Across the street is an actual building that looks like the rest of Hoboken. As you go down Harrison on both sides, you couldn't tell what part of Hoboken you're in at that part, because we, as the housing authority, as housing authority residents, I don't believe should be treated any differently. We should look the same as the rest of Hoboken. We should be able to be proud of our neighborhoods. And that's what we wanted out of this plan, was to make a roadmap, right, that says, yes, we can do this, that we work out the financial numbers, that we work out the actual concept of how the Hoboken Housing Authority can transform itself. Because if we don't, we can't maintain these buildings further. They're 70 years old, as many of you know, they've got issues, and we need to do something. We need to move forward. And we have the right people around the table right now to move this forward. So I am incredibly excited. We've been working on this, as you know, for well over a year. I think the plan's a solid one. It's a solid roadmap. We have a ways to go. Again, as Brian said, once we have this strategic plan approved, we then go to the city for a redevelopment plan. They get their 2 cents into it. We take a look, we work out that redevelopment plan. Little things could change, building heights could change, parking areas could change as time goes by. We as a housing authority and the board is absolutely committed to continuing to have the residents as a part of each of those conversations as we go through the next couple of years. We are fortunate, and I'll close on this once again, that we have a space that we can build the first building in. So no one has to be displaced. We can build that first building. It's big enough to move folks over into that building and then deal with those 2 buildings, build new, come to the next one, move folks over, and go around all of our properties like that. It's an exciting concept, and I think the team has done a great job of that. So those were my comments. We'll also be going over the questions that we received on Facebook and in the mail as well. But I want to just stop for a moment, take a deep breath. Any comments from you folks?
I would just like to add to what you're saying, that the land that we're going to be building on is generally worth 25 to 30% of the finished product. So what we're worried about, what are we going to do for our assets? We got it. We own the land, and it's a big plus.
We'll continue to own that. This is controlled by the housing authority. I want to say it clearly, this is not the housing authority selling out rich condos. It is not. It is public and assisted low-income housing. Low and moderate income housing. That's what we're going to have at the end of this. Our commitment is to our residents first. Anything anyone want to add before I go on to questions and my accumulation of questions and things? Feel free. We're going to be able to stop again toward the end.
Mark, your sound is going in and out, and it's pretty faint. I don't know if that's because of how you're moving around the room, or your microphone or something. Maybe somebody in the room can help you figure out where's the best place to be.
Is that any better, Jaime? Is that any better?
It's okay. It's not strong.
Okay, that's about as loud as I can get in the room. How about you, Dave? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you, but I can hear you too.
Okay, so we'll get Jaime.
It is, yeah, if you could just make sure to face this way, maybe when you're addressing as much as you can, and maybe that'll help. I wanted to add one more thing. Thanks, Angel. That'll help. I just want to add one more thing that I didn't have a slide for, but I mentioned early on that another really great part of this framework is the financial assessment and analysis, which is also in the document, that gives the housing authority some idea that this can be funded through realistic funding sources through HUD and state in tax credits and things like that. So there are strategies to do this. This isn't like, here's this plan, how the heck are we going to pay for it? There are it's baked into this plan is how to pay for it too.
So Brian, I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to comment that, you know, you guys that draw these pictures, you get all the slides, you get an hour to present. When we presented to the board, I got one slide. Okay.
I cut you out.
But today I didn't even get one slide. But I won't hold it against you.
It's just, it takes, there's so much nuance, Jaime, that it takes a good study of the actual document to
There you go. There you go.
appreciate it. But
So anything else, Jaime?
No, I'm good.
Jaime is our numbers guy. This guy has developed, how many you think, Jaime? I mean, you've been all over this country assisting in the development of low and moderate income housing. These folks that are on the planning team are not rookies. They've been around the horn a few times. So Jaime, I think you've done one or two, haven't you?
I would think that would be safe. That's a safe bet.
Yeah, probably a little more than one or two, right? And that's one of the things I've learned with working with this team is we were fortunate enough in bringing this team together to have people that have done hundreds of low and moderate income units, if not, well, I'd say thousands across the country.
yeah.
This is a team that is not a rookie team. We put together a team that I think would hold up to any team in the country. We not only have the Tortigalis team and the planners, but we also have the enterprise partner that was directly hired by HUD to help us with this. And they report directly back to HUD. And HUD has been watching this whole process. And they've been involved in the whole process from day one. And they have our draft plan. They reviewed our draft plan. So we're really on the right road here. This is doable, which is what we wanted to accomplish with this plan. To make sure we're at the starting gate and we can make this happen.
So Mark, if I could add one comment. Most authorities that want to do a tear down and replacement of their public housing have to compete for 9% tax credits. That just means it's a very competitive process. The states have a limited amount of money to make allocations or awards for 9% tax credits. And, you know, the projects get scored and they're competing against professional developers and owners that do that for a living. So it's very hard for most authorities to plan on a demolition and replacement of the majority of their public housing. In the case of Hoboken, given your location and the fair market rents in your community, a recent change by Congress on the 4% tax credit program, we can show that your numbers work just with the debt and that the project can support while funding reserves for future repairs and replacements, and the use of 4% tax credits, which although some states run out, they're non-competitive. So it's not scored in New Jersey, and you get them in at the right time of the year, and you have as good a chance as anybody else to get funded. So your financial picture looks better than virtually every other authority's portfolio that I typically work with. So, and your total development costs are at least $750 million. All of that without having to assume even the authority using its capital funds as a source. So your numbers do look very positive.
Thank you, Jaime.
Yep.
Means a lot. Anything else from the planning team right now? If not, we'll go on to some of the frequently asked questions. And Angel got to go over to my presentation that was on the flash drive. And hopefully we'll be able to share that, right?
Tell us a few jokes in the meantime.
I'll try to think of some. All right, very good. I think that should work. We can see most of it anyway. Maybe we can move could we move the other occupants over just a little bit? Maybe just make them, yeah, there we go. There we go. We can see most of it now. And I think I've got my slide changer ready, right? Sitting in the back there. All right, very good. That'll work. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, so next slide, please. So these are residents' questions and concerns that came up as of today. We can't see it up on top, but it says April 6th up there. That's today. We've also got questions that were asked last September and were answered back in September as part of this. I'll go through those a little quicker, but feel free to stop me if you've got comments on them. But these are things that came into us that needed to be answered. One of the questions, first one, would we be able to go back to our original apartment at Monroe Gardens? And this really, after the renovation, this really applies to all of us, all of our properties. The ability to return to that exact same apartment can't be guaranteed, particularly at the elderly and disabled buildings. We're going to have to reconfigure a number of the bedrooms. For example, when we're done with this, there will be no more 0 bedrooms or efficiency or studio apartments. They're not up to standard anymore. So those apartments will be bigger. They'll be completely gutted out and rebuilt. So the apartment numbers are going to change a little bit. You'll be able to come back to that building, but not necessarily the same apartment, right? So that whole renovation project will change things a little bit. So your old apartment may be a little bit different than your new apartment, but you'll have that place to live, guaranteed. All right. What's the unit mix? The unit mix of each of the phases matches the existing unit mix for the buildings in each phase. I'll unpack that for you. The unit mix will be adjusted for current or over under housing conditions. So when we build a new building, you're always concerned about who are the people that are going to move into that building, and do they need a bigger apartment? Do they need a smaller apartment? How many people are there? So we're going to build the new building with in mind of who's going to be moving into that building. So that unit mix would be adjusted. And so it's a little too early to say. The strategic plan to give us this roadmap doesn't get us there yet. When the architects come on board, right? And the architects start designing that first building, and we have all those great questions of what's the outside going to look like, what kind of amenities you're going to have, what's the bedroom sizes, those will all come when we're in the design phase. We're not in the design phase right now, we're in the strategic planning phase. So that's how we're going to determine unit mix building by building. Same with the unit sizes. The unit sizes are consistent with current standards for newly constructed dwelling units. That's a great statement, by the way. The reason it's a great statement is that new standards are not standards from 70 years ago, right? The buildings we have now and the unit designs we have now are from 70 years ago. They're not built to be ventilated correctly. They're not built to handle the electrical loads we have. They're not built for the right ventilation. They're not built for the right number of bathrooms. 1 bathroom, 3 bedroom, that's going to change, right? That will change the size of the units. The basic bedrooms today have become larger. All of that in the design phase will happen, right? We've got brand new accessible dwelling unit standards from the Americans with Disability Act back in 1950, whenever they were built. Those didn't exist, much less thinking about a bathroom that has a roll-in shower with enough turning radius for a wheelchair. They didn't even think back then about having cabinets that were lower so somebody that has a problem with reaching. They didn't even think about that when our buildings were built. Gives us an opportunity here to meet all of those standards with new buildings. Really exciting for me. Next slide, please. is the two-way street on Marshall, the modern day version of the Stealth Highway. I love this one. Yeah, I think there was some proposal many years ago about having a highway along that part of Hoboken. And no, that's not what we're doing here. What we're proposing is that we have that street along the light rail, if you will, in the back of the housing authority property that just goes from Second and ends at 6th Street. And that's just for behind our property. It doesn't, this thing we're doing doesn't extend all the way over to the other side of town. So there's no consideration of that at all. It's just our property. And as Brian said, when he gave you all the kind of the rundown on how our traffic would flow in the new proposal, it's clear that it's just for our property and for getting around our property. What it does though, is it does link our property over to the light rail. So you could drive over to the light rail. It ends there behind our property.
Mark, I just want to add
Yes.
that, yeah, I just want to add that probably the opposite of a highway, the way we envisioned it, that each block would have a stop sign and crosswalks to get you to the resiliency park. So it'd be a very kind of a, just like in most of regular Hoboken, where it's just, you know, each block you kind of stop and yield for pedestrians. So that's all.
Thank you, Brian. That's a good point. This isn't going to be pass-through friendly.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. This is a good one. What's the plan to mix the buildings racially, financially, culturally, if relocation only happens for whatever is knocked down? A few years ago, New York City had this problem with allowing 4 doors for tenants in the affordable units that sought off to the side. And when and how do we mix? The way the plan is set up now is HHA's #1 guiding principle is to assure that all of our current residents are not displaced. We've said it 5 times, probably said it 100 times this year, and we're going to continue to say it. No one gets displaced, without exception. That's why our plan is to occupy our first new building with only housing authority residents. Right? We want to make sure that we start this project with a #1 housing authority residents. As we progress in future phases, we'll only add additional low and mod income based units that can be created after existing residents in the next phase are guaranteed their unit. Okay. Lastly, there will be no corridors. No. So if we were to have a phase where we could build, say, 150 units, but the next phase, only 120 people needed to move in, we might have 30 extra units to build, to have more low and moderate income units. That's where the mixing would come in. That's in those small sections. But that's phase 2, 3, 4 down the line. That first building, we're committed to that. Public housing, residents only. Next slide, please. Can we consider a building that is limited to just the elderly? Current HUD regulations prohibit an age-restricted building for public housing. They just prohibit it. And that's why we now have elderly and disabled in our buildings. Disabled individuals are by regulation eligible for admission to a senior and disabled public housing building. Yet as we move forward, we will consider this as part of our plan. If there's a way we can actually get this in, we would, but we have to be cognizant of existing regulations and laws that are out there. That's a congressional law, by the way. Might want to talk to our congressman about that over time.
So Mark, if I could comment, under the Section 8 rules, the authority can adopt a preference for seniors, and that's kind of the equivalent of when you, under public housing, you designate a building for a particular group. But Section 8 doesn't allow that, but you can have a preference. So when you're screening applicants, you can give preference to seniors if you want to, work toward having an all senior building.
Thank you, Jaime. And that's why we left in that we'll consider this as part of our plan, depending on the financing. We'd love to do it. We'll keep it there as considered. Public housing doesn't allow it. As we go down the road on a new funding platform, we may be able to. We're not going to let that go. Will the new approaches be ADA accessible? ADA, Americans with Disability Act, I kind of mentioned that already. But yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because we have an issue, big issue with that now. A lot of our buildings are not ADA accessible. because they were built 70 years ago. A number of comments and concerns have been voiced regarding the final design and amenities of the new buildings. Some of those concerns, will we have balconies, what type of appliances, finishes, flooring, et cetera, will be provided. It's really too early in that process to identify the design of the buildings. This is a roadmap. And as you can see from what we presented, this doesn't give you that final design of what the outside is going to look like on every building. This roadmap shows we can do it. It shows we can do it financially, physically. It shows that we can safeguard each and every resident so that no one loses a unit, period, turn page. We haven't gotten to the level yet of actually hiring an architect to design that building. Once we have an architect to design that building, then we get into the questions, and you'll be along with us during those stages. What's the outside going to look like? What's the finish going to look like? What kind of floor would we use? What kind of refrigerator would we be putting in? All of those questions, right? What kind of faucets would we use? What kind of sinks? Those will come when we're ready to start building. That's a little bit down the line from now. Right? Will Mama Johnson Field be preserved? Yes, absolutely. So that came in. So I think those are all of our most recent questions that came in between the last ones in September and now. Yeah, those are all of our most recent ones. I don't want to talk too fast, but I also didn't want to bore the heck out of all of you guys. So some folks are looking at me going, yeah. So I hope I've answered the most recent questions that came in. And if anyone's got any more, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be just as transparent as possible. Right? All right. What's next on the agenda, gentlemen? We're getting there. Ladies and gentlemen. We are having, I want to remind everyone, as we roll down this road, like I said at the beginning, our board is going to be considering this plan for approval a week from tomorrow night, right? So it'll be in our public board meeting, and you will have a chance, anyone who would want would have a chance to comment then. Our board is having a special meeting tomorrow night to talk and consider this. This is a specially called meeting, so it's not the meeting where folks are going to be able to get on and talk and have questions and answers. That will come the week after. But tomorrow night, our board is having a special meeting that they'll be talking about some issues. They'll be talking about some financing issues. And so part of it may be an open session, part of it may be a closed session for financial and real estate reasons. But they're going to be getting together tomorrow night to talk this over. And then a week from tomorrow night, we're going to hopefully have a motion to approve this. Well, it just depends on where the meeting goes, on whether there's certain laws that talk about if financing or real estate is going to be discussed, that it's allowed to be done. That decision hasn't been made yet. It's the board's decision tomorrow night.
I mean, but this affects us all. You know, what real estate agents, financing,
Yeah. Well, there's no real estate agency at this point. It's all just strategic planning at this point. I understand. I understand your point of view.
how do we access the meeting?
Yeah, if you want to get on our website, you'll find it on our website.
Mark, it was hard to hear the question. Could you repeat it?
Well, the most current question is how could it get on the meeting tomorrow night? And the overall opinion was if the board goes into a closed session, that it's not very democratic. That's, yeah. Okay, very good. Anything you want to do in closing, planning group? Want to give it back to the Zoom crew? Yeah, and then we'll have plenty of questions. Sure.
So tomorrow's going to be HHA closed, another one for the public. And then something about a board. So we're talking about like the board that we in the city that we talked about on
Okay, there is a draft plan out now, and that's on our website. And then on a week from Thursday is when the board would be voting on that plan, on whether it's going to be approved or whether they will adopt this roadmap that we presented to you tonight. Right now, the board has not approved this plan yet as a strategic plan. And a week from tomorrow, it will be coming before the board for possible approval.
So, but now, in the approval, what is the question that comes to, you know, we can make any promises we want about keeping tenants, but unless something is right, is that already in writing?
It's in the plan. It's in the plan. Yes,
So when you go online,
yes, right up front on our website. And please read through it. Read through it. It's a well thought out document. Yes, please.
What's the difference between low moderate roadmap versus mixed income? Which I hear people talking about either fears of mixed income or fears that it's not going to have housing for
Yeah.
families,
Yeah.
or that we can't sustain it unless this.
Yeah, the question is, and I'll maybe restate it so everyone can hear it, is what is the difference between low and moderate income and mixed income? And there are some fears out there that we cannot sustain this plan unless we have market rate higher income, and that there's a fear that because of that, there's going to be, if you will, too many, I don't know what to say, too many higher income people and not enough for low and moderate income people. Yes,
Or throwing it out of balance. with
Yes.
the original vision.
yes, understood. The fear is that it would be thrown out of whack and throw it out of the initial vision that we have. So I'd like maybe the planning team, but I'd like to say a couple things. One is that this plan does sustain housing at its current funding level. We don't need market rate housing to make this work. We don't need it, no. This not only pays for the renovation and the rehabilitation, but it also has a very good level of sustainability, much higher than we have in public housing now. The public housing budgets over the past 20 years have done this, 30 years. They've gone down virtually every year. We get in capital funds almost 50% of what we got 20 to 30 years ago. This is nationally, and those budgets have just gone down and down and down. This takes us out of that funding stream and puts us over into more of a Section 8 funding stream, which has traditionally gone up and up and up, right? And the rent levels are much higher. Now, Jaime is the guy that did the numbers for us. So I'll just turn over to anybody on the planning team that wants to mention how we've done to give a level of security that this is not only a doable, but sustainable project, right, over the years.
So Mark, since you mentioned my name, I'll make a couple comments. I agree with everything that you've said. I think that the question of having an income mix, so with some market rates, some moderate income, and low income and very low income, in many communities is a policy objective. And the fundamental focus of the board so far has been to first assure the housing for all of the current residents without exception in terms of a right to return. And in subsequent phases, because they're, the design is such that it is possible down the road to bring in more of an income mix. There's enough land for it currently, and the timing of that and how to build it into the process is still to be fully fleshed out. But, I suspect that there's a strong sentiment, if not an overriding sentiment, but it's certainly there's good representation on the board and within the authority to work toward having more of a income mix, because that's more natural. That's the way communities are. That if you have 100% of everything the authority owns is all very low income, that's a little bit of an imbalance. So I think although the early stages are not showing that being built into them as part of the plan, I think things may evolve as people get more comfortable with the comfortable that the foremost goal of providing house for every existing household is the primary goal. I like to phrase that as build back first for the residents, right? So build back first for the residents. That's the operative principle at the moment.
I'm all agreeing that's where it's the next wave of resistance.
Yes.
Being the redevelopment implication
Yes.
to the other powers that be.
Yes.
And I thought I'd mention it
Yeah.
because that's what I've heard.
And we are glad you brought it up, because my board has been absolutely committed since the beginning of this, and put it in writing in our development principles of the plan. You can see it in the board's development principles that they've passed, that it is residents first and it is guaranteed for residents, number one. And through the work we've done, we have found, and we weren't sure when we started this, we have found that this is not only, again, redevelopable, but sustainable, comfortably sustainable. Because as Jaime said, the rent levels under this program in Hoboken are high enough to sustain this, have a higher level of maintenance, have a higher level of management. So we're absolutely committed to keeping that going. This is not going to be sold out to condos. Yeah. Maybe we could do microphones. Should we do microphones? Can they hear us? Can you hear the question?
It'd be better if there was a roving mic, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Mike would be great, because I do want everyone to hear this. This is an important meeting. I want everyone to hear it and answer our questions.
I want to make
Yeah.
one statement about what I said. If streets have the first residence, we need more low and moderate.
We do.
We don't need mixed market rate. So we need that. We need places for the people with less income and economic status to live in their community.
Yes.
And I just think that if you ever increase the density in any way, it should be to increase on stock of local housing.
Yep. Low and moderate income housing is what we do.
Yeah, but here's the problem. What does that mean? Like, I had a girlfriend who not qualified for low income housing, still by the median income. Now, the median income in Hoboken is so incredibly high. So my point is that she lives in Manhattan, where Queens is something like, oh, I don't even remember, like $80,000, so she couldn't even qualify for low income. And here's someone who's looking for public housing and can qualify for it. Well, she doesn't make that median income of $80,000.
She doesn't make enough money?
Huh?
She doesn't make enough?
That's right, she doesn't make enough.
Mhm.
Because she's making like $25,000, she cannot qualify for public housing.
Yeah.
Qualify for levies, public housing, and so on. She does not meet the income requirements.
Yeah. So is it somebody that's making too much for public housing, but not enough to be qualified for median?
No, she makes $25,000, but the median income is something like $80,000, therefore she cannot get low income housing.
Oh.
At $25,000, she's too poor to get public housing in New York City.
Yeah.
So what does that mean, low income?
Well,
Low income, does that mean you have to make, you know?
Let me ask this group if they know, because I've never heard of that before. So the question is, if somebody's making $25,000 a year, for example, and the median for the area is 80,000, her friend wound up being told that she didn't make enough money to go into low and moderate income housing. Never quite heard that before. Have you folks run into that? Did I put that fairly?
So my first comment would be, where is that? And if it isn't Hoboken, then that person should come to Hoboken. You'd accept them in.
I've never heard of that.
Yes,
I
it's
truly have
common.
never heard of that.
In New York City, this is common. Buildings all have these, they call low income is really, really middle class.
But it's not just New York City, because when there's applications that went out in Jersey City for the senior builders in Jersey City and some in North Bergen and other places, they, for one person, they expect that person to make more than 39,000 a year. And then if there's two in the household, they expect it to go, they gradually goes up even more. So I don't understand why put the application out there if someone like me, I use myself as an example. I'm on SSI, okay, I'm disabled. I don't qualify because I don't make, because it was applications, because I see the paper.
Yeah.
And I was gonna fill it out, but I didn't qualify because one person, I don't make the 39,000 and something a year in order to pay, and the rent would have been like 1,000 or something a month. Because they calculated that outside. In this one, so, I mean, I have seen it, but I don't know how the case is in New York, but in Jersey City, for example, the new senior buildings that were going up, that was how it was in the paper. Because I looked at it and I'm like, like, please.
So they have minimum income levels that you have to
Yes.
make in order to go into this housing.
So, condo.
Yeah, let me ask the planning group, but how does, some housing I've heard out there is targeted toward what they call workforce housing, right? That new teachers, new policemen, folks like that, you know, in Hoboken, what does a 3-bedroom cost to rent, right? 4,000 a month or
Yeah.
something like that.
3,000 or something, yeah.
Yeah, so how's a new policeman with a family going to live in Hoboken? You know, so I think some folks target that population. Now, it doesn't mean you don't build low-income housing, the lowest of low-income housing.
How they call low income, someone who has to earn $80,000.
Yeah, 80,000.
That's horrible there. I mean, that's not low income.
That's a lot of money. That's absolutely true. Have
So-
you, anybody, yeah. Jaime,
So
or
Mark,
Heather?
what it sounds like to me is in the tax credit program, there is not a subsidy per se. There are, and they're considered affordable housing and low-income housing tax credit program. And to be competitive to get approved for tax credits, you often have to design certain income tiers that percentage of the units are serving. So some may be serving the people below 30% AMI, some may be serving people between 40 and 60% of area median income. So it is possible that the speaker is talking about a project of that nature, where for a certain number of the units, applicants, maybe those where they have some openings, need to be between that income range, and the floor to that is 40% AMI as an example, just to make it up. But whatever that is in the community, if they don't have that income, then they don't qualify for that so-called affordable housing. That's not the same as the deep subsidy that you're providing, the housing authorities can provide and Section 8 can provide, where people of almost any low income can qualify. So I think it's, you know, needing to understand what exact project is the person talking about, what are the rules it's playing under, where is it getting its funding, and what are the rules for that funding. That's different than what you have. Everybody you have currently, all 1,354 households are eligible, period, no matter how low income they are. If you have some tax credit units as part of that, and you likely will have many of them, they may, there may be some people in the future who make too much to qualify for a unit that is just a tax credit unit, and doesn't have a deep subsidy tied to it. So, it's very complicated, but generally, I think, Mark, if you can emphasize just what your plan is for these units, it's not determined by what Jersey City does or what a private developer does in any other place in New Jersey or New York for that matter. So it's the rules you're going to be playing under.
And our switch over, and then I'll hand it back. I think what I heard Jaime say, and getting my gears going, is that the program you're talking about may not have had a Section 8 subsidy attached, which is different with our program. We are guaranteed that Section 8 subsidy, which is a deep subsidy, so we can house people of low and very low income, as opposed to just a straight tax credit project that sometimes goes up to the higher incomes. I'd love to explore that with you and find out what programs they have and how they were funded. But is that fair? I think that's kind of a summary, Jaime, in many ways, that we have that Section 8 subsidy and they don't.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
I have a question now. Section 8, is Section 8 still going to be around? Is it still going to be one of the capabilities that the tenants going to be able to have? Because I mean, it goes by your income. See, when I was working, I was paying by my income. Now that I'm disabled, I pay by my income. So does it fluctuate, or it just stays the same as it is now? It will stay the same when the new buildings come about. What about Section 8? Because at any time, they can cancel that program. They have done it before, and they can do it again. Because as if they're trying to say, all the insurance and everything is changed because it's like a deficit now. Like so much money, I guess, is thrown out there. Now they're trying to recoup all the money back the best way they can. Or slash things in half what you used to get, you can't get anymore.
Yeah, I think the concern of the Section 8 program being reduced or slashed or going away is the basic question, right?
Yes.
Two parts of it. One is the rental determination going to remain the same as you have now in public housing? And the answer is yes to that. Okay. Second part is, I'll do it first and then anyone else. Section 8 has been a more well-funded program since the day it began in public housing. Public housing is the program that's being shut out. They don't want public housing anymore, right? So every year, the Section 8 program has been funded better and better and better, where public housing has gone this way. The Section 8 funding program has private investment from all over the country. Some of those guys you hear about that own some of those big Section 8 buildings and stuff, they don't let Congress get away with reducing their funding. We'll now be in that funding stream as opposed to a non-popular funding stream of public housing. And I'd like to ask if anyone from the planning team, did I say that right? Anything you'd like to add to that? Because I believe that Section 8 is much more secure than the public housing program.
I think that's right, Mark. There are two kinds of Section 8. There's project-based vouchers that come through the Housing Authority and are part of your Housing Choice Voucher Program. And then there's project-based rental assistance that are contracts directly from HUD. And the project-based rental assistance is the stronger program. It's been around over 30 years. It's got over 2 million households being supported by it. And it has never not had the HAP contract, the Housing Assistance Payment Contract from HUD, be fully funded in the entire history of project-based rental assistance Section 8. And that's what we're looking to target your financing for.
Okay, because at one time, sir, they, because I used to go to all the meetings for housing authority. This is way before Mr. Greco came. And there were tenants that they was in jeopardy of losing their Section 8. They bombarded the housing authority meeting because I was there. They bombarded and they was upset because they got, at one time, it was, they wanted to finish the program. They didn't want to have nothing to do with it anymore. And the people were down the street, because they had a voucher that came from housing, that's how they was able to move out, but they was in jeopardy of losing their voucher as well.
Did you hear that? Some folks at some point in the past at the Logan
See,
Housing
I know
Authority.
from meetings, I used to be at the meetings heavily, I used to be at City Hall heavily, speaking my mind and my piece, but that for sure, I knew that people were in jeopardy of losing those vouchers at one time.
So, I just want to feedback on this question. So, this will remove us out of HUD, and we will no longer be HUD housing, we will be all Section 8 voucher, is that what the situation?
We go over to Section 8 project-based assistance, which is different than the vouchers. It will be in project-based assistance with a contract with HUD to own and maintain that housing.
How is that?
It's out of the public housing program. And the public housing program is dwindling and getting smaller, and the Section 8 program funding level is what HUD prefers and wants you in the Section 8 program, which has continually had an increase in funding.
Yeah, but right now, I already know, I work with the government, they have already told us, they're laying off staff members. Okay, so they're laying, you already lost 50% of the staff.
Yeah.
Okay, they expect 90% of the staff to be gone, so I mean, there is a discussion going on, no one is talking about it, but a lot of people have lost their jobs, and the government has no money, so I don't understand where this money is coming from for Section 8 vouchers. And you can try to sell me the Brooklyn Bridge, but I know the money isn't there, I know the money isn't there. So, so I don't understand how this, I mean, how this is different than what we have now. And also, the city now owns the property. Who owns the property?
The housing authority. The housing authority owns the property.
So
Yeah.
even afterwards, the housing authority,
Yes.
no, housing authority as in HUD, who owns it?
The housing authority. The Hoboken Housing Authority owns that property.
But under HUD, not under like Hoboken, under some private landlord, like that.
Yeah, we have a contract with HUD, and HUD has a stipulation on the property that says the Hoboken Housing Authority must use it for low and moderate income housing. But we own the property. If you go down there, you'll see the Hoboken Housing Authority on the deed. It's the Hoboken Housing Authority's property. So the initial worry was that the Section 8 program may run out of money, that we're in a depression state, or we were heading in that direction, and that how could we finance this or trust this going into the Section 8 program? Is that fair? Yeah, and I'll let you comment, but my comment too is that if you're worried about that, public housing will be the first to go. Public housing is more in danger if that should happen in the Section 8 program.
It's converted to Section 8 though, what he's saying is,
Right.
public housing is going down, like,
Yeah, but the
it's
difference is-
worthless, it's
Yeah,
worthless,
but that's-
so they are switching over to Section 8. Section 8, or he said the two programs, that's what they're converting from public housing to those two programs they're converting to. So it won't be public housing anymore, it'll be Section 8 vouchers, or the two programs that he said, so I can't remember, but
Yeah.
it's still Section 8.
Okay, this is even if tomorrow drops, right? And there's no money to repair anything, we still have a place to live. Okay, that doesn't change, we still live there, we have a place to live, that's still ours, it just won't be any repair money, because there's no repair money because of the fact that there's no money to cover. But the Section 8 housing voucher is very different, because what there, if there's no voucher, I mean, see what my question is?
I think I do.
Yeah.
I think I do. But if the bottom were to drop out tomorrow and we were under Section 8, the buildings would still be there. And we would still have a place to live, except that they would be new rather than 70 years old and falling apart. And that's the reality we have to wrestle with, is if our buildings don't get renovated and or replaced,
The Band-Aids ain't working.
the Band-Aids, they need substantial renovation. The pipes inside are 70 years old, they're breaking every day. Something needs to be done. And I think a lot of folks know that something needs to be done. If something major isn't done 10, 15 years from now, many of these buildings could be condemned. We cannot do that. The electrical systems cannot keep up with modern loads. The buildings are designed so the ventilation isn't good. They're built for 70 years ago. There's one elevator in each building. The elevator goes down. and folks have to walk. Something needs to be done with these buildings. They will not last another 50 years. They won't. Something has to be done with these
Everybody else
buildings.
says that's fine, quality of life, and why not?
This gentleman has a question. So he's asking about how long is the project going to take, and also when will they start moving?
The preliminary estimate is it would probably be between 14 to 24 months before the first building is started. Now, this project, this is a roadmap. It's going to take time. There would have to be a redevelopment plan approved by the city, so we still have to go through all that together. Then there has to be design, and then there has to be the permits, the bidding. We're almost 2 years out before the first building begins to be built. And then once the first building's built, that takes a number of months, right? So your question was, when are the first moves? That first building is built, then the first people move into that first building. You're 2.5 years away from now. Yes. Maybe faster. I think we're a couple years out, right?
Can I ask another question?
You can ask as many as you want. That's what we're here for.
What's the downside of the buildings being condemned? Who would then own the property and what would happen? Like if nothing was done and the buildings got condemned, which is which they're headed towards, then who benefits? No realtors, no developers, not the city? You mean that it would stay fallow, the land?
I think we don't want to go.
No, we don't, but I think that.
City, I ask you a question.
We own the property.
Well, we own the property, but if the building was to get.
If we didn't do this and it got condemned, wouldn't everybody lose their residence?
Everyone.
But nobody gains, because you're gonna get, I believe, that the new development in Hoboken, they're waiting it out so that they can claim the property under eminent domain.
Yes.
We don't want that. We need to prevent that, and that is one of the reasons we're doing this, right? We need to be proactive. We need to protect our existing residents and our future low and moderate income residents. Crucial.
So, I'm sorry. The buildings will still be basically public housing. It's just the way that the public housing is funded. Is that correct? In other words, I'm not going to be in a building where suddenly everyone is getting evicted for the minorest things, because that's what happened in South Carolina. In Durham, they had the RADS program, and slowly but surely, at this point, there's not one resident left, not one. So you can see the concern. I mean, they were being evicted for things that were just, it was done on purpose. It was, it was like, you're black, you sell drugs. Didn't matter if the person never sold drugs. They just, one strike, you're out, and they just stroke everybody. And so that is a concern. Yeah.
This will still, I think the RAD program's come a long way since those days. I know about that project. I know a couple of them over time, and the RAD program has developed to have some real safeguards that just doesn't happen anymore. But yes, it will be under the control of the housing authority. There will not be a mass sellout to somebody else. It will not be, public housing is a technical term that we use for the type of funding we get. It will be under Section 8 housing, which is a contract with HUD that clearly binds us into this property, this land, being used for low and moderate income housing, period.
But again, low income housing by our standards, not by the standards of $41,000, $80,000.
Yes, with the deep subsidy, yes, ma'am, with the subsidy program that keeps it, that it is possible for the poorest of the poor to remain. You wouldn't see a difference. For those of us that live here, you wouldn't see a difference in your rent. And the folks that come in would be under that same program, which is calculated the same way.
I mean, you understand the fear.
I do. I understand the fear
We have
very
no
well.
money for subsidy and how to go.
Yeah.
Like I said, a building, you live here, you don't take over the building.
We understand the fear very much. And we've seen the history of it, and I think we've got people around the table that are not going to allow that. Yes, and we'll keep repeating that. And we expect you to hold, I expect you to hold, we expect you to hold our feet to the fire continually. Because we will continually have these meetings, we'll continually be coming back to you. Anything else? Good question, by the way. This is what this meeting's for. This is what these meetings are for. Yes?
We get air conditioning in these new units, we get a dishwasher in the kitchen.
Well, that's extra money.
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, Aaron, the question is, do we get air conditioning? Do we get dishwasher? We aren't in the design phase yet, as I said earlier, but I don't think there's any doubt that air conditioning will be part of the modern
Don't use
design.
the dishwasher, you're gonna have 24 ones.
Yeah,
That way
that-
you put that in.
there is no doubt on air conditioning. That is just part of the modern design. That's going to happen. I will stick with Michelle on maybe dishwashers, maybe not. We'll talk about that when we get there. Sort of like the question on garbage disposals, right? Yeah. Washing, I think a space for washing machines in any modern apartment, you actually get that designed in. You know, again, we're not at the point of design, but I haven't seen any modern apartments. That is because our issue, again, that's another issue we have with our properties, is they're not designed for washing machines. And the waste disposals aren't designed for washing machines, and that's why we get the big backups that some of you have experienced and we fixed. So that's the type of thing that can be remedied. But yeah, I think you can expect, Aaron, if that's what you're asking, I think you can expect when we're done with this process, modern, solid apartments, not apartments that are falling apart, apartments that have modern amenities, that have nice deep sinks, closet doors, lights in the living room, exactly. As opposed to, we have bedrooms with one receptacle, one outlet, right? One outlet in the living room, one outlet in the bedroom.
Wait a minute, I had 3 outlets in each room, so I got like one, and that is.
It's terrible. It's terrible. They're so old. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work anymore. And I know there's issues. I know there's fears. I know there's trust factors. We know that. But if we don't do anything, something's going to happen to us. We don't want that. We need to. And you deserve better housing. You deserve housing that's not falling apart, Mr. Aaron.
Materials, if you upgrade materials, it doesn't add much cost to the, because most of the money is in the labor, and the better material will be easier to install than a cheaper material.
I sure hope they don't do cheap.
So we want to give that this will include really wonderful stuff. The kitchen counters, no formica. We can do better. You know, a deeper kitchen sink. Well, every little element, we can bring it up a grade, and it won't cost much more.
It's not even shallow.
Not even a shower. I grew up without a shower too, by the way. And you're so much younger than I am. So I understand. I understand. And we've retrofitted stuff over the years. We've got those windows that rot out, those sills that rot out. Got just so where do you stop? Where do you begin on this? So I know there's fears. I know there's a trust factor we're going to have to deal with over the years. I understand that. And I'm hoping that you all will keep coming back and holding us accountable because it's important. Keep pushing, keep watching. Yeah, we know that. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for coming.
So we're gonna have a board meeting tomorrow, but we're gonna discuss what.
They're going to discuss the strategic plan.
Okay. What are they gonna, pass it? I
No, there'll be no vote tomorrow.
mean,
There'll be no vote.
public meeting.
Yes.
So at what point is it gonna be discussion on voting on it? You don't even have this point, design plans or.
Right, but it's just the strategic plan that you'll see on our website that will be voted on a week from Thursday.
Okay, got it.
There's a lot of next steps to come. Designs, all that, that's all in the future.
And the city.
The redevelopment plan has to be approved by the city. Financing has to be lined up still, all of that. We're all in preliminary talks and all of that still. I just got to thank you. This has been a great meeting. Keep it up, please. Let's communicate. Many of you have my number, my cell phone number. I'll give it to you if you don't. And if you've got comments or want to discuss at any time, please come and see us at any time, anywhere. We'll be glad to keep talking to you. Thank you for coming tonight. And thank you to my fine planning team for being here tonight. Thank you. We picked on Jaime quite a bit. That's a good thing. And,
Thank you, everybody.
And I didn't even
Thank
get
you
a
all.
slide.
Good job, everybody. Good job. Good job. Thank you.
Sorry, Jaime. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Night.
All right. Good night. It's always like